Question 1. Examination of the data shows that a proposed Cisco Firepower Access Control Policy update is intended to enhance network segmentation and block unauthorized outbound communication. However, there is a lack of clarity regarding the specific business applications that rely on the network segments targeted by this policy. Which of the following approaches best ensures that the implementation of this security policy does not negatively impact critical business operations? Option A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment involving application owners and business stakeholders to identify all critical applications, map their network dependencies, and analyze the potential effects of the proposed policy changes before implementation. Option B. Proceed with the policy implementation on a small group of non-critical servers, first to observe any immediate issues before a wider rollout. Option C. Implement the policy using the vendor's recommended default settings, assuming they are designed for broad security effectiveness. Option D. Deploy the policy immediately to all network segments, as the security benefits of blocking unauthorized communication outweigh any potential operational disruptions. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment involving application owners and business stakeholders to identify all critical applications, map their network dependencies, and analyze the potential effects of the proposed policy changes before implementation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of business applications. The core difficulty lies in accurately assessing the impact of a proposed security policy change on critical business functions. Without a thorough impact assessment, implementing a new policy could inadvertently disrupt essential services, leading to financial losses, reputational damage, and noncompliance with service-level agreements, SLAs. The pressure to deploy security measures quickly can sometimes lead to shortcuts in the assessment process, making it professionally challenging to advocate for a comprehensive and time-consuming evaluation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented impact assessment. This process begins with identifying all critical business applications and services that rely on network connectivity. It then involves analyzing how the proposed Cisco Firepower Policy change, e.g., New Access Control List, Intrusion Prevention System Rule, might affect the availability, performance, and integrity of these applications. This includes understanding traffic flows, port usage, and communication patterns. The assessment should involve collaboration with application owners and business stakeholders to gather accurate information and validate findings. The outcome is a clear understanding of potential risks and the development of mitigation strategies or policy adjustments to minimize negative impacts. This aligns with best practices in risk management and IT governance, ensuring that security initiatives support, rather than hinder, business objectives. From a regulatory perspective, especially within frameworks that emphasize due diligence and risk mitigation, common in many cybersecurity regulations, a documented impact assessment demonstrates a proactive and responsible approach to security management. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the policy change without any prior assessment is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a disregard for business continuity and potential service disruption, which could violate contractual obligations, SLAs, and regulatory requirements mandating the protection of data and service availability. This approach prioritizes security implementation over operational stability, a clear misjudgment of risk. Applying the policy change to a limited subset of non-critical applications first, with the intention of observing effects before a full rollout, is also problematic. While seemingly cautious, it still lacks a comprehensive understanding of the potential cascading effects across the entire network and its interconnected applications. It fails to address the interconnectedness of modern IT systems and could still lead to unforeseen disruptions. Ethically, it represents an incomplete risk assessment, potentially exposing the organization to unmanaged risks. Relying solely on vendor default configurations or best practice guides without a specific assessment of the organization's unique environment is another failure. While vendor recommendations are valuable, they are generic. An organization's specific application dependencies, traffic patterns, and risk tolerance may differ significantly, making default settings potentially inadequate or overly restrictive. This approach neglects the fundamental principle of tailoring security controls to the specific context of the organization, a key tenet of effective cybersecurity and regulatory compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured risk management framework. This involves 1. Identifying assets and dependencies, applications, services. 2. Understanding the proposed change and its potential impact vectors. 3. Quantifying where possible and qualifying the potential impact on availability, integrity, and confidentiality. 4. Developing mitigation strategies or alternative solutions. 5. Documenting the entire process and obtaining stakeholder buy-in. This systematic approach ensures that security decisions are informed, justifiable, and aligned with business needs and regulatory obligations. Question 2. Performance analysis shows a slight increase in latency and a minor reduction in throughput on a critical application server after the implementation of a new Cisco firepower security policy designed to enhance threat detection. The security team is debating the next steps, which approach best balances security enhancement with operational continuity and regulatory compliance. Option A. Deploy the new policy across the entire network as planned, assuming the observed performance changes are within acceptable operational tolerances for enhanced security. Option B. Ignore the performance metrics and focus solely on verifying the security effectiveness of the new policy, as security is the primary objective. Option C. Conduct a phased rollout of the new policy to a subset of users and servers, while continuously monitoring key performance indicators, KPI, and network telemetry for any significant degradation. Option D. Immediately revert to the previous security policy to eliminate any performance impact and reevaluate the new policy in a lab environment without user impact. The correct answer is C. Conduct a phased rollout of the new policy to a subset of users and servers, while continuously monitoring key performance indicators, KPI, and network telemetry for any significant degradation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the impact assessment of a new security control on network performance is critical for maintaining operational continuity and compliance. Poorly executed impact assessment can lead to either overblocking legitimate traffic, causing service disruptions and potential regulatory noncompliance, e.g., failing to meet service-level agreements, or underblocking, leaving the network vulnerable to threats and again risking regulatory scrutiny for inadequate security. The challenge lies in balancing security efficacy with performance requirements, a common tension in network security operations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased, controlled deployment of the new Cisco firepower security policy, coupled with continuous monitoring of key performance indicators, KPI, and network telemetry. This methodology aligns with best practices for change management and risk mitigation in IT security. Specifically, it allows for the identification of performance degradation or unintended consequences in a controlled environment before a full rollout. Regulatory frameworks often mandate a risk-based approach to security, which includes testing and validation of controls. By monitoring metrics like latency, throughput, and packet loss, the organization can objectively assess the impact and make informed decisions about policy tuning or rollback. This proactive and data-driven approach ensures that security measures are effective without unduly compromising network functionality, thereby upholding both security and operational integrity, which are often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory compliance standards. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the new policy across the entire production network without prior testing or monitoring is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach demonstrates a disregard for risk management principles and could lead to widespread service disruption, violating service-level agreements and potentially breaching data protection regulations if critical business functions are impacted. It also fails to meet the standard of care expected in network security operations, which requires due diligence in deploying new controls. Rolling back the policy immediately after a minor, unquantified performance anomaly without further investigation is also professionally unacceptable. This reaction is overly cautious and can undermine the security posture by delaying or abandoning necessary security enhancements. It suggests a lack of confidence in the assessment process and potentially a failure to understand the nuances of network performance under new security policies. This could lead to a situation where known vulnerabilities remain unaddressed, risking non-compliance with security mandates. Ignoring performance metrics and solely focusing on the security efficacy of the policy is another failure. While security is paramount, network performance is a critical operational requirement. Many regulations implicitly or explicitly require the maintenance of business operations. A security control that cripples network performance can be considered ineffective from a holistic operational perspective and may lead to indirect compliance failures if essential services cannot be delivered. This approach neglects the interconnectedness of security and operational performance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, iterative approach to deploying new security controls. This involves 1. Understanding the business impact of potential performance degradation. 2. Defining clear, measurable performance baselines and acceptable thresholds. 3. Conducting a pilot deployment in a non-critical segment of the network. 4. Implementing comprehensive monitoring of relevant network and application performance metrics during the pilot. 5. Analyzing the collected data to identify any deviations from baselines or unacceptable impacts. 6. Tuning the security policy based on the analysis, or if impacts are severe, considering alternative configurations or controls. 7. Gradually expanding the deployment while continuing to monitor performance. 8. Having a well-defined rollback plan in place. This systematic process ensures that security objectives are met while minimizing operational disruption and adhering to professional standards of care and regulatory expectations for risk management. Question 3. The assessment process reveals that a proposed update to the Cisco Firepower Threat Defense (FTD) intrusion prevention system (IPS) signature database is intended to enhance protection against emerging web application exploits. However, there is concern that certain signatures might inadvertently impact the performance of critical internal financial applications. Which of the following actions best represents a professional approach to managing this potential impact? Option A. Rely on the vendor's assurance that the signature update is backward compatible and will not cause performance degradation, proceeding with a direct production deployment. Option B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment by simulating the IPS signature deployment in a lab environment that mirrors the production network, analyzing traffic patterns, application response times, and error logs for any anomalies before a full production rollout. Option C. Immediately deploy the updated IPS signature database to all Firepower devices to ensure the network is protected against the latest threats and address any performance issues that arise reactively. Option D. Disable IPS functionality for the financial application servers temporarily until the new signatures can be evaluated, prioritizing immediate threat protection over potential application disruption. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment by simulating the IPS signature deployment in a lab environment that mirrors the production network, analyzing traffic patterns, application response times, and error logs for any anomalies before a full production rollout. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a critical need to understand the impact of network security changes on business operations. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing technical security enhancements with the operational continuity and compliance requirements mandated by the 300-710 SNCF exams implied regulatory framework, which focuses on securing networks. A thorough impact assessment is crucial to avoid unintended consequences that could lead to service disruptions, data breaches, or non-compliance with security standards. The correct approach involves a systematic evaluation of how proposed Firepower configuration changes, such as new intrusion prevention system, IPS, policies or access control list, ACL modifications, will affect application performance, user access, and data flow. This includes identifying critical business processes, understanding their dependencies on network resources, and simulating the impact of the changes in a controlled environment before deployment. This proactive methodology aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that security measures are effective without compromising business functionality, thereby upholding the principle of least privilege and maintaining a secure yet accessible network. It also implicitly supports regulatory adherence by demonstrating due diligence in managing network security risks and ensuring operational resilience. An incorrect approach would be to implement changes without a comprehensive impact assessment. This could manifest as deploying new IPS signatures that inadvertently block legitimate business traffic, leading to service outages and potential financial losses. Such an action would represent a failure to adhere to professional standards of risk management and could violate implicit regulatory expectations for maintaining network availability and integrity. Another incorrect approach is to solely focus on the technical security benefits of a change, ignoring potential operational side effects. This demonstrates a lack of holistic understanding of network security's role within the broader business context, and could lead to a situation where security is enhanced at the expense of usability or compliance, creating new vulnerabilities or operational bottlenecks. A third incorrect approach is to rely on anecdotal evidence or past experience without performing a specific assessment for the current environment. This is a failure of due diligence and can lead to unforeseen issues as network environments and application behaviors evolve. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the scope of the proposed change. This should be followed by identifying all stakeholders, including IT operations, application owners, and business unit representatives. A risk assessment should then be conducted, detailing potential impacts on confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Mitigation strategies and rollback plans must be developed. Finally, a controlled deployment with thorough post-implementation monitoring and validation is essential. This systematic approach ensures that all aspects of the change are considered, minimizing risks and maximizing the likelihood of a successful and secure network configuration. Question 4. Analysis of the potential consequences of a network intrusion on critical business functions and sensitive data, and how these consequences inform the prioritization of security controls within a Cisco firepower environment, is a fundamental aspect of network security. Which of the following best describes the primary objective of conducting a thorough impact assessment in this context? Option A. Implement the maximum number of security features available in Cisco firepower to ensure absolute protection against all conceivable threats. Option B. To delegate the responsibility of understanding security risks to external auditors without internal review or validation. Option C. To exclusively document the technical vulnerabilities discovered during network scans, regardless of their potential effect on business operations. Option D. To identify and quantify the potential business and regulatory ramifications of security incidents, to guide the allocation of security resources and the design of effective mitigation strategies. Correct answer is D. To identify and quantify the potential business and regulatory ramifications of security incidents, to guide the allocation of security resources and the design of effective mitigation strategies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in a regulated environment where network security is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of a business that relies on timely access to sensitive data. A misstep in the impact assessment process can lead to either inadequate security, exposing the organization to significant risks and potential regulatory penalties, or overly restrictive controls that hinder business operations and productivity, potentially leading to financial losses and compliance issues related to data availability. The professional must navigate these competing demands while adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing their operations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of identifying potential impacts of a security incident, prioritizing them based on business criticality and regulatory requirements, and then developing appropriate mitigation strategies. This aligns with the principles of risk management and due diligence expected within a regulated industry. Specifically, it requires understanding the potential consequences across various domains: operational disruption, financial loss, reputational damage, and regulatory noncompliance. By focusing on the potential impact on critical business functions and sensitive data, the assessment ensures that security resources are allocated effectively to address the most significant threats. This proactive and structured methodology is a cornerstone of responsible cybersecurity practice and is often implicitly or explicitly mandated by regulatory frameworks that require organizations to protect data and maintain operational resilience. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely focus on the technical severity of a potential threat without considering its business impact. This can lead to overinvesting in defenses against low-impact threats while neglecting critical vulnerabilities that could cripple business operations or lead to significant data breaches. This failure to contextualize technical risks within the business and regulatory landscape is a significant professional and ethical lapse, as it deviates from the principle of proportionate risk management. Another incorrect approach is to assume that any security incident will have a catastrophic impact, leading to overly broad and restrictive security measures. While caution is necessary, an indiscriminate approach can stifle innovation, impede legitimate business activities, and create an environment where users circumvent security controls, thereby creating new vulnerabilities. This demonstrates a lack of nuanced understanding of risk and its practical implications, failing to meet the professional standard of implementing effective and efficient security solutions. A third incorrect approach is to defer the impact assessment entirely to a third-party vendor without internal validation or understanding. While external expertise is valuable, the ultimate responsibility for understanding and mitigating risks within an organization's specific context lies with its internal security professionals. Relying solely on external assessments without internal due diligence can lead to a disconnect between the assessment and the organization's actual operational realities and regulatory obligations, representing a failure of professional accountability. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured risk management framework that begins with understanding the organization's critical assets and business processes. This involves close collaboration with business stakeholders to identify what is most valuable and what would be most detrimental to lose or compromise. The impact assessment should then systematically evaluate potential threats against these assets, considering the likelihood and potential severity of consequences across operational, financial, reputational, and regulatory domains. This assessment should be documented thoroughly, forming the basis for security control selection and prioritization. Regular review and updates to the impact assessment are crucial to adapt to evolving threats and business changes. This methodical approach ensures that security investments are aligned with business objectives and regulatory mandates, fostering a culture of informed risk-taking and robust security posture. Question 5. Stakeholder feedback indicates a growing concern regarding potential disruptions to critical customer-facing services following the planned deployment of Cisco Firepower NGFW capabilities. The IT security team is tasked with assessing the impact of this deployment. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices for conducting this impact assessment? Option A. Focus the impact assessment exclusively on the technical configuration of the Firepower devices, disregarding any potential effects on end-user experience or business workflows. Option B. Immediately proceed with the Firepower deployment to address the identified security vulnerabilities and address any service disruptions as they arise post-implementation. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment by identifying all affected systems and services, quantifying potential operational and business consequences, and engaging key stakeholders for input and validation before finalizing the deployment plan. Option D. Delegate the impact assessment solely to the network engineering team, assuming they possess all necessary knowledge of business operations and user impact. The correct answer is B. Immediately proceed with the Firepower deployment to address the identified security vulnerabilities and address any service disruptions as they arise post-implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for enhanced network security with the potential disruption to critical business operations and the need for clear, documented communication with affected parties. The Cisco Firepower 300-710 SNCF exam focuses on securing networks, and impact assessment is a crucial phase in implementing security solutions like Firepower. A thorough impact assessment ensures that security measures are effective without causing undue harm to the organization's ability to function. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and documented evaluation of the proposed Firepower deployment. This involves identifying all affected systems, understanding their criticality, and assessing the potential consequences of the security changes. By engaging stakeholders early and often, the IT security team can gather essential information, manage expectations, and build consensus. This proactive communication aligns with ethical responsibilities to inform those impacted by changes and regulatory expectations. Though specific regulations are not cited for this exam, general principles of due diligence and risk management are implied that require organizations to understand and mitigate risks associated with security implementations. Documenting the assessment provides an auditable trail, demonstrating due diligence and adherence to best practices in security deployment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical implementation without considering operational impact would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of understanding of the broader business context, leading to potential service outages, financial losses, and damage to the organization's reputation. Ethically, it breaches the responsibility to minimize harm to the organization and its users. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying the assessment until after deployment, represents a significant failure in risk management. This reactive stance can lead to unforeseen problems that are more difficult and costly to resolve, potentially violating compliance requirements that mandate proactive security measures and risk mitigation. Furthermore, bypassing stakeholder consultation during the assessment phase demonstrates a disregard for the operational realities of the business and can lead to resistance and mistrust, undermining the effectiveness of the security initiative. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the business objectives and then systematically assesses the technical and operational impacts of any proposed security change. This involves a phased approach: initial scoping, detailed impact analysis, technical, operational, financial, stakeholder consultation, risk evaluation, and mitigation planning, followed by phased implementation and ongoing monitoring. This structured process ensures that security solutions are implemented effectively and responsibly, aligning with both technical requirements and business needs. Question 6. The evaluation methodology shows that a new IPS signature has been developed to detect a specific advanced persistent threat, apt, targeting financial services. The security team is considering deploying this signature across the entire production network using Cisco firepower. Which of the following deployment strategies best balances security enhancement with operational stability and compliance? Option A. Defer the deployment of the new IPS signature indefinitely until a perfect, risk-free deployment method can be guaranteed. Option B. Immediately deploy the new IPS signature to all production interfaces to ensure maximum protection against the APT as quickly as possible. Option C. Deploy the new IPS signature only to a dedicated lab environment and consider it sufficient for threat detection without impacting production systems. Option D. Deploy the new IPS signature to a small subset of non-critical production interfaces first, monitor for false positives and performance degradation, and then gradually expand the deployment while maintaining a readily available rollback plan. The correct answer is D. Deploy the new IPS signature to a small subset of non-critical production interfaces first, monitor for false positives and performance degradation, and then gradually expand the deployment while maintaining a readily available rollback plan. Explanation: the evaluation methodology shows a critical need for a robust impact assessment when implementing network security changes, particularly with Cisco firepower. This scenario is professionally challenging because a misstep in assessing the potential impact of a new intrusion prevention system, IPS, signature deployment can lead to significant operational disruption, security vulnerabilities, or compliance failures. The pressure to quickly enhance security posture must be balanced with a thorough understanding of the consequences. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased, controlled deployment coupled with comprehensive monitoring and rollback capabilities. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and minimizing risk. By testing in a controlled environment, analyzing logs for false positives and negatives, and having a clear rollback plan, the security team ensures that the new signature effectively addresses threats without introducing new problems. This proactive stance is essential for maintaining network integrity and availability, which are fundamental to business operations and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach that involves immediately deploying the new IPS signature to all production interfaces without prior testing or analysis is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This demonstrates a disregard for due diligence and a failure to adhere to best practices in change management, which are often implicitly or explicitly required by security frameworks and compliance mandates. Such an action could lead to widespread service outages, potentially violating service-level agreements, SLAs, and regulatory requirements for service continuity. It also exposes the network to unforeseen risks, as the signature's behavior in a live environment is unknown. Another incorrect approach, which is to delay the deployment indefinitely due to fear of potential disruption, is also professionally unacceptable. A caution is necessary. Inaction in the face of known threats is a failure to protect the organization's assets. This can lead to security breaches that could have been prevented, resulting in financial losses, reputational damage, and potential regulatory penalties for failing to implement reasonable security measures. This approach neglects the organization's responsibility to maintain an adequate security posture. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on the technical efficacy of the signature without considering its impact on network performance or application functionality, is also flawed. This narrow focus ignores the broader operational context. A signature that blocks legitimate traffic or degrades network performance can be as detrimental as a missed threat. Professional decision-making requires a holistic view, considering the security benefits against potential operational costs and risks. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment and impact analysis. This includes identifying the change, understanding its intended benefits and potential risks, evaluating the scope of the impact, technical, operational, business, defining testing and validation procedures, establishing clear rollback criteria and procedures, and obtaining necessary approvals before deployment. Continuous monitoring and post-deployment review are also crucial components of a mature security operations framework. Question 7. Research into the potential consequences of a zero-day exploit targeting a core customer relationship management (CRM) system reveals a high technical severity. However, the system is only used by a small, non-critical department for internal record-keeping, with no external access or sensitive data stored. Which of the following approaches to impact assessment best aligns with professional network security, best practices, and regulatory expectations for risk management? Option A. Recommend decommissioning the CRM system immediately without further assessment, as any high-severity vulnerability poses an unacceptable risk to the organization. Option B. Prioritize immediate, extensive remediation efforts for the CRM system due to the high technical severity of the zero-day exploit, diverting resources from other potentially more critical systems. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates the business criticality of the CRM system, the sensitivity of data it holds, and the potential for cascading effects on other business operations, even if the technical severity is high. Option D. Focus solely on the technical details of the zero-day exploit and its potential for exploitation, assuming that any high-severity vulnerability warrants maximum resource allocation, regardless of business context. The correct answer is B. Prioritize immediate, extensive remediation efforts for the CRM system due to the high technical severity of the zero-day exploit, diverting resources from other potentially more critical systems. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical nature of network security and the potential for significant business disruption and data compromise. The impact assessment phase is crucial for understanding the consequences of a security incident, which directly informs the prioritization of remediation efforts and resource allocation. A thorough impact assessment ensures that the organization can effectively mitigate risks and comply with relevant regulations by understanding what assets are most vulnerable and what the potential fallout would be. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a systematic and comprehensive evaluation of potential consequences. This includes identifying critical assets, understanding their business value, and quantifying the potential financial, operational, and reputational damage that could result from a security breach. This aligns with the principles of risk management and due diligence expected in network security, ensuring that security controls are proportionate to the identified risks. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical severity of a vulnerability without considering its business impact is professionally unacceptable. This failure to contextualize the risk within the business operations can lead to misallocation of resources, where minor technical issues might be overemphasized, while critical business functions remain exposed. This can also lead to regulatory noncompliance if the assessment does not adequately consider the impact on data privacy or service availability, which are often mandated by regulatory frameworks. Another incorrect approach that neglects to involve key business stakeholders in the impact assessment is also professionally flawed. Security is a shared responsibility, and without input from those who understand the business processes and data flows, the assessment will be incomplete and inaccurate. This can result in a failure to identify all critical assets or understand the true cascading effects of a security incident, leading to inadequate security measures and potential regulatory violations related to business continuity and data protection. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment methodology. This begins with asset identification, followed by vulnerability assessment, and then a thorough impact assessment. The impact assessment should consider various dimensions: financial loss, operational disruption, reputational damage, and legal/regulatory consequences. Crucially, this process must involve cross-functional collaboration, including IT security, business unit leaders, legal counsel, and compliance officers. The findings should then be used to prioritize security investments and incident response planning, ensuring that the organization is resilient and compliant. Question 8. Process analysis reveals that a Cisco Firepower Threat Defense (FTD) deployment is generating an overwhelming volume of low-severity intrusion prevention system (IPS) alerts, significantly impacting the Security Operations Center's (SOC) ability to prioritize and respond to critical security events. The organization is concerned about alert fatigue and the potential for genuine threats to be missed. Which of the following approaches represents the most effective and professionally responsible method for addressing this situation? Option A. Implement a comprehensive tuning strategy for the IPS policies, involving analysis of alert data, creation of custom rules, refinement of existing signatures, and strategic use of security intelligence feeds to reduce noise while maintaining robust threat detection. Option B. Ignore the high volume of alerts, assuming they are all false positives, and continue with the current configuration to avoid disrupting ongoing security operations. Option C. Apply generic, widely published IPS tuning recommendations without specific analysis of the organization's network traffic patterns or threat profile. Option D. Broadly disable the IPS functionality on the FTD devices to immediately reduce the alert volume and allow the SOC to focus on other security tasks. The correct answer is D. Broadly disable the IPS functionality on the FTD devices to immediately reduce the alert volume and allow the SOC to focus on other security tasks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security, balancing the need for granular threat detection and prevention with the operational overhead and potential for false positives. The organization is experiencing a surge in alerts from its Cisco Firepower Threat Defense (FTD) devices, impacting the Security Operations Center (SOC) team's ability to effectively triage and respond to genuine threats. The professional challenge lies in identifying the root cause of this alert fatigue without compromising the security posture or introducing new vulnerabilities. This requires a deep understanding of Firepower's capabilities, threat intelligence, and the organization's specific risk profile. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-driven methodology to tune the Firepower Intrusion Prevention System (IPS) policies. This begins with analyzing the high-volume, low-severity alerts to identify patterns and common sources, leveraging Firepower's correlation capabilities and threat intelligence feeds (e.g. Talos) is crucial to distinguish between legitimate, albeit minor, network activity and potentially malicious behavior. The process should involve creating custom intrusion detection system (IDs), rules, or modifying existing ones to be more specific to the organization's environment, thereby reducing noise. Furthermore, implementing security intelligence feeds for known malicious IP addresses and domains can proactively block traffic from untrusted sources, reducing the number of alerts generated by less critical events. This approach aligns with best practices for effective security operations, ensuring that the security team can focus on high-priority incidents, thereby optimizing resource allocation and improving incident response times. It also adheres to the principle of least privilege and defense in depth, ensuring that security controls are effective and efficient. Incorrect approaches analysis. Disabling IPS entirely or broadly reducing the sensitivity of all intrusion detection rules without a thorough analysis is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action would create a gaping hole in the network's defenses, leaving the organization vulnerable to a wide range of cyber threats that the IPS is designed to detect and prevent. Such a broad-stroke approach directly contravenes the principle of maintaining an adequate security posture, which is often mandated by industry regulations and compliance frameworks. It also represents a failure in professional due diligence, as security professionals are ethically obligated to implement and maintain effective security controls. Ignoring the alerts and continuing with the current configuration, despite the operational strain, is also professionally unacceptable. This inaction leads to alert fatigue, which can desensitize the SOC team to critical events, increasing the likelihood of a genuine security incident going unnoticed. This failure to proactively manage and tune security systems can have severe consequences, including data breaches, financial losses, and reputational damage, all of which could lead to regulatory penalties and legal liabilities. It demonstrates a lack of proactive threat management and a failure to adapt security controls to the evolving threat landscape and the organization's specific operational context. Implementing a one-size-fits-all tuning approach based on generic best practices without considering the specific network environment and threat profile of the organization is also problematic. While generic best practices provide a starting point, effective IPS tuning requires customization. Applying generic rules without understanding their impact on legitimate traffic can lead to either excessive false positives or, more critically, missed threats. This lack of tailored security can result in noncompliance with specific regulatory requirements that mandate a risk-based approach to security controls. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing this situation should adopt a structured incident response and tuning methodology. This involves 1. Incident identification and prioritization. Recognize the alert fatigue as a critical operational incident impacting security effectiveness. 2. Data collection and analysis. Gather detailed logs and alert data from firepower to identify trends, sources, and types of alerts. 3. Root cause analysis. Determine why specific rules are generating excessive alerts, e.g., misconfigurations, legitimate but noisy traffic, outdated rules. 4. Solution design and implementation. Develop a tuning strategy that includes creating custom rules, refining existing ones, leveraging C and potentially adjusting thresholds. 5. Testing and validation. Implement changes in a controlled environment or during off-peak hours and monitor their impact closely. 6. Documentation and reporting. Maintain detailed records of all changes made, their rationale, and their effectiveness. 7. Continuous monitoring and improvement. Regularly review IPS performance and adjust policies as the threat landscape and network environment evolve. This systematic approach ensures that security controls are effective, efficient, and compliant with relevant regulations, while also optimizing the performance of the security operations team. Question 9. The audit findings indicate that the intrusion prevention system, IPS, policies configured on the Cisco Firepower Management Center, FMC, are not effectively blocking a specific category of Advanced Persistent Threat (APT) indicators of compromise (IOC) that have been recently identified by the Threat Intelligence Team. The audit report suggests that the current IPS rules are too broad and may be causing performance degradation, leading to potential false positives or missed detections. The Security Operations Team is tasked with addressing this discrepancy without compromising network availability or introducing new security gaps. Which of the following actions best addresses the audit findings and ensures the continued effectiveness and efficiency of the IPS deployment? Option A. Immediately disable the IPS inspection for all traffic associated with the identified APT IOCs to prevent any potential performance issues and allow the security team to investigate further without immediate operational impact. Option B. Review the specific APT IOCs, analyze the existing IPS rules for relevance and efficacy, and create or tune specific intrusion detection/prevention rules to accurately detect and block the identified threats, while also optimizing rule sets to minimize false positives and performance impact. Option C. Implement a blanket increase in the severity level of all existing IPS rules across the entire network to ensure that any potential match is flagged, regardless of its specific relevance to the identified APT IOCs or potential for false positives. Option D. Remove all custom IPS rules and revert to the default Cisco IPS rule sets to ensure a baseline level of security, while the team researches the specific APT IOCs and their corresponding detection methods. The correct answer is B. Review the specific APT IOCs, analyze the existing IPS rules for relevance and efficacy, and create or tune specific intrusion detection/prevention rules to accurately detect and block the identified threats, while also optimizing rule sets to minimize false positives and performance impact. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential misconfiguration in the intrusion prevention system, IPS, policies within the Cisco Firepower Threat Defense (FTD) environment. This scenario is professionally challenging because a misconfigured IPS can lead to either a false sense of security, allowing malicious traffic through, or operational disruption, blocking legitimate traffic. The core challenge lies in balancing security effectiveness with business continuity, all while adhering to the principles of network security as outlined by Cisco's best practices and implied by the 300-710 SNCF exam objectives, which focus on practical implementation and troubleshooting. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based method to identify and rectify the IPS policy issue. This entails reviewing the specific audit findings, correlating them with the actual IPS configuration on the Firepower Management Center, FMC, and then implementing targeted changes based on a thorough understanding of the threat landscape and the intended security posture. This approach represents best professional practice because it is proactive, minimizes risk, and ensures that security controls are effective and aligned with organizational requirements. It directly addresses the audit findings with a solution that is technically sound and operationally viable, adhering to the principle of least privilege and defense in depth. An incorrect approach of simply disabling IPS entirely for the affected traffic would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This is because it abandons a critical security control without proper justification or remediation, leaving the network vulnerable to known and emerging threats. It violates the fundamental responsibility to maintain a secure network environment. Another incorrect approach, such as making broad, undocumented changes to multiple IPS policies without a clear understanding of their impact, risks introducing new vulnerabilities or causing unintended service disruptions. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to follow established change management processes, which are implicitly expected in professional network security operations. Such actions could lead to compliance issues if specific security standards or regulations require documented and tested security configuration. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Thoroughly understanding the audit findings and their implications. 2. Gathering all relevant technical data from the Firepower Management Center and other monitoring tools. 3. Consulting documentation and best practices for the specific IPS features and rules in question. 4. Developing a precise remediation plan with clear objectives and rollback procedures. 5. Implementing the changes in a controlled manner, preferably during a maintenance window, and verifying their effectiveness through testing and ongoing monitoring. 6. Documenting all actions taken and communicating them to relevant stakeholders. Question 10. Which approach would be most effective in streamlining the management of Cisco Firepower access control policies for an organization experiencing increased remote access needs to sensitive data, while maintaining a robust security posture and facilitating compliance? Option A. Implement granular access control policy rules for each unique remote IP address and required port, creating a comprehensive but potentially unmanageable policy. Option B. Leverage object groups for IP addresses, networks, and services within the access control policy to create more manageable and scalable rules. Option C. Disable specific security features on the Firepower device for remote access to reduce policy complexity. Option D. Broadly permit all traffic from remote IP addresses to all internal servers and ports to simplify policy creation. Correct answer is A. Implement granular access control policy rules for each unique remote IP address and required port, creating a comprehensive but potentially unmanageable policy. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security, balancing the need for granular access control with the operational overhead of managing complex policies. The organization is experiencing a surge in legitimate business needs for accessing sensitive data from remote locations, but the existing Firepower Access Control Policy Act is becoming unwieldy and difficult to maintain. This complexity increases the risk of misconfigurations, which could lead to either security breaches or denial of service for legitimate users. The professional challenge lies in finding a method to improve security posture and operational efficiency without compromising the integrity of the network or the business's ability to function. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging the capabilities of Cisco firepower to implement more efficient and scalable access control. Specifically, utilizing object groups for IP addresses, networks, and services, and then applying these groups within access control policy rules significantly enhances manageability. Object groups allow administrators to define a collection of related objects, e.g., a group of remote user subnets, a group of servers hosting sensitive data, a group of application ports, and then reference this single group in ACP rules. This reduces the number of individual entries in the ACP, making it easier to read, update, and audit. When a new remote subnet needs access, only the object group needs to be updated, rather than modifying multiple individual rules. This aligns with best practices for network security management, promoting the principle of least privilege by clearly defining allowed traffic and reducing the attack surface. From a regulatory perspective, clear and auditable access control policies are fundamental to compliance frameworks that mandate data protection and access management. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to create a separate, highly specific access control policy rule for every single remote IP address and every single port required for access. This leads to an exponentially growing ACP, making it extremely difficult to manage, troubleshoot, and audit. The regulatory failure here is the creation of an unmanageable policy, which indirectly hinders compliance with requirements for regular security audits and the ability to demonstrate effective access controls. Ethically, it increases the likelihood of human error, potentially exposing sensitive data or blocking legitimate access, which is a failure of due diligence. Another incorrect approach would be to broadly permit all traffic from remote IP addresses to all internal servers and ports. This directly violates the principle of least privilege and significantly increases the attack surface. The regulatory failure is a blatant disregard for data protection and access control mandates, exposing the organization to severe compliance penalties. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility in safeguarding organizational assets and sensitive information. A third incorrect approach might be to disable security features on the firepower device for remote access to simplify policy management. This is a critical security and regulatory failure. It bypasses the intended security functions of the device, leaving the network vulnerable to a wide range of threats. Compliance with security standards would be impossible, and the ethical implications of knowingly weakening security are severe. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this scenario by first understanding the current state of the ACP and identifying the specific pain points. The decision-making process should prioritize solutions that enhance both security and operational efficiency. This involves consulting the Cisco firepower documentation and best practices for policy design. The key is to think in terms of logical groupings of resources and access requirements, rather than individual instances. Regularly reviewing and refining the ACP, even when using object groups, is crucial. Professionals should also consider the impact of policy changes on business operations and ensure proper change management procedures are followed. When faced with policy complexity, the instinct should be to abstract and group, not to simplify by weakening security or creating unmanageable sprawl. Question 11. The review process indicates that the organization's network security posture needs to be rigorously assessed against U.S. federal regulations governing the protection of sensitive data. The Cisco Firepower Intrusion Prevention System, IPS, is deployed to monitor and control network traffic. Which of the following actions best aligns with the objective of ensuring regulatory compliance through firepower IPS configuration? Option A. Disable certain IPS inspection policies for high-traffic segments to improve network performance, relying on other security controls to mitigate potential risks. Option B. Implement IPS rules based solely on the default signature sets provided by the vendor without further customization or analysis of specific regulatory mandates. Option C. Configure firepower IPS to detect and block traffic patterns, specifically identified as threats to data protected under relevant U.S. regulations, such as HIPAA or PCI DSS, by leveraging custom or updated intrusion detection signatures. Option D. focus IPS configuration on blocking generic malware families without specific consideration for the types of sensitive data the organization handles or the regulations that protect it. The correct answer is C. Configure firepower IPS to detect and block traffic patterns specifically identified as threats to data protected under relevant U.S. regulations, such as HIPAA or PCI DSS, by leveraging custom or updated intrusion detection signatures. Explanation. The review process indicates a critical need to ensure that network security policies align with established regulatory frameworks. In the context of the 300-710 SNCF exam, which focuses on Cisco firepower for network security, understanding how to implement and manage security policies that comply with relevant U.S. regulations is paramount. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a deep understanding of both the technical capabilities of Cisco firepower and the specific legal and regulatory obligations that govern network security in the United States. Misinterpreting or failing to adhere to these regulations can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and a compromised security posture. The correct approach involves configuring firepower's intrusion prevention system, IPS, to detect and block known malicious traffic patterns that violate specific U.S. regulatory mandates, such as those related to data privacy and critical infrastructure protection. This represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the requirement to protect sensitive data and maintain the integrity of network operations in accordance with U.S. law. By proactively identifying and mitigating threats based on regulatory compliance needs, security professionals demonstrate due diligence and a commitment to safeguarding organizational assets and user information as mandated by frameworks like HIPAA for healthcare data or NIST guidelines for critical infrastructure. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on generic threat intelligence feeds without correlating them to specific regulatory requirements. This is professionally unacceptable because it fails to demonstrate a targeted effort to meet legal obligations. For instance, a generic feed might flag a broad category of attacks, but without understanding which of those attacks specifically target data protected by HIPAA, the response might be insufficient or misdirected, leading to a regulatory violation. Another incorrect approach is to disable IPS features for performance reasons without a formal risk assessment and documented exception process. This is ethically and legally unsound, as it prioritizes operational efficiency over mandated security controls. U.S. regulations often require specific security measures to be in place, and disabling them without proper justification and mitigation is a direct contravention of these requirements, exposing the organization to undue risk and potential noncompliance. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to implement IPS rules based on the vendor's default configurations without customization for the specific regulatory environment. While defaults offer a baseline, they are not tailored to the unique compliance needs of an organization operating under U.S. law. This lack of customization can leave critical vulnerabilities unaddressed, leading to regulatory noncompliance and security breaches. The professional reasoning process for such situations involves a systematic approach. First, identify all applicable U.S. regulatory frameworks, e.g., HIPAA, PCI DSS, NIST. Second, understand the specific security requirements within those frameworks. Third, map these requirements to the capabilities of Cisco firepower, particularly its IPS module. Fourth, configure and tune IPS policies to detect and prevent threats that violate these specific regulatory mandates. Fifth, conduct regular audits and reviews to ensure ongoing compliance and effectiveness. Question 12. The analysis reveals that a critical network segment managed by Cisco Firepower Threat Defense, FTD, has experienced anomalous traffic patterns indicative of a potential advanced persistent threat apt, targeting sensitive customer data. The Security Operations Center, SOC, has received multiple high-severity alerts from the FTD, but the exact nature and extent of the compromise are not yet fully understood. The organization operates under U.S. federal regulations governing data privacy and breach notification. Given this situation, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action to balance security containment, investigation, and regulatory compliance? Option A. Initiate a complete network-wide shutdown to prevent any further potential data exfiltration, and then proceed with a broad system audit to identify the vulnerability. Option B. Begin immediate remediation by patching all potentially vulnerable systems within the affected segment without a full understanding of the attack vector or its impact. Option C. Immediately isolate the affected network segment from the rest of the network, initiate a full forensic capture of all traffic within that segment, and begin a detailed analysis of FTD logs and alerts to identify the source and scope of the compromise. Option D. Rely solely on the automated alerts from the FTD to block all suspicious IP addresses and domains, assuming the threat is fully identified by the system. The correct answer is C. Immediately isolate the affected network segment from the rest of the network, initiate a full forensic capture of all traffic within that segment, and begin a detailed analysis of FTD logs and alerts to identify the source and scope of the compromise. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between maintaining network security and ensuring business continuity during a critical incident. The need for rapid response to a potential data breach, coupled with the requirement to adhere to strict incident response protocols, demands careful judgment. Missteps can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust, all of which are amplified by the sensitive nature of the data involved. The pressure to act quickly must be balanced against the imperative to follow established procedures and regulatory mandates. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased response that prioritizes containment and investigation while adhering to the Cisco Firepower Threat Defense (FTD) incident response framework and relevant U.S. regulatory guidelines for data breach notification and handling. This includes immediate isolation of affected systems to prevent further compromise, thorough forensic analysis to understand the scope and nature of the breach, and meticulous documentation of all actions taken. This aligns with best professional practices by demonstrating a commitment to both security and compliance. Specifically, it addresses the requirements of regulations like HIPAA, if health data is involved, or PCI DSS, if payment card data is involved, by ensuring that the response is timely, accurate, and minimizes further harm. The focus on evidence preservation and a structured investigation is crucial for both remediation and potential legal proceedings. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately shutting down all network services without a clear understanding of the breach's scope. This could lead to unnecessary business disruption, potentially violating service-level agreements and causing significant financial losses. From a regulatory perspective, such a broad shutdown might hinder the ability to collect necessary forensic evidence, complicating compliance with data breach notification laws that require a clear understanding of what data was compromised. Another incorrect approach is to solely rely on automated threat detection alerts without human verification and a defined incident response plan. While automated tools are vital, they can generate false positives. Acting solely on alerts without proper validation can lead to misallocation of resources, unnecessary panic, and potentially overlooking the true nature of the threat. This failure to conduct a proper investigation is a direct contravention of the due diligence expected under most data protection regulations. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to remediate the threat by making immediate, unverified changes to security configurations without a clear understanding of the root cause. This could inadvertently worsen the situation, introduce new vulnerabilities, or destroy critical forensic evidence. Regulatory frameworks emphasize a methodical and documented approach to incident response, and ad hoc remediation efforts are antithetical to this principle. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a scenario should employ a structured decision-making process. First, activate the predefined incident response plan. Second, prioritize containment and isolation of affected systems. Third, initiate a thorough forensic investigation to determine the breach's scope, impact, and root cause. Fourth, consult with legal and compliance teams to ensure adherence to all applicable U.S. regulations regarding data breach notification and reporting. Fifth, implement remediation steps based on verified findings and document all actions meticulously. This systematic approach ensures that security objectives are met while minimizing legal and business risks. Question 13. Quality control measures reveal a sudden surge in network traffic flagged by Cisco Firepower Threat Defense (FTD) intrusion prevention system (IPS) alerts, specifically related to a particular internal server. The alerts indicate potential policy violations, but the nature of the traffic is not immediately clear, and the affected server hosts a critical business application. What is the most appropriate initial step to take to address this situation? Option A. Increase the logging verbosity for all network traffic passing through the FTD without specific focus on the anomalous alerts. Option B. Broadly whitelist all traffic originating from or destined for the affected server in the FTD access control policy to eliminate alert noise. Option C. Review the specific IPS signatures that are triggering on the anomalous traffic and analyze the associated traffic metadata to understand the context of the alerts. Option D. Immediately disable the IPS service on the FTD for the affected server's network segment to restore application functionality. The correct answer is C. Review the specific IPS signatures that are triggering on the anomalous traffic and analyze the associated traffic metadata to understand the context of the alerts. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security, balancing the need for granular control and threat prevention with the operational impact of policy changes. The challenge lies in accurately identifying the root cause of the observed traffic anomalies without introducing new vulnerabilities or disrupting legitimate business operations. The pressure to quickly resolve the issue, coupled with the complexity of the Firepower Threat Defense (FTD) system and its various security services, requires a systematic and evidence-based approach. Misinterpreting the traffic or applying overly broad security policies can lead to false positives, denial of service for critical applications, and a false sense of security. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a methodical investigation using the FTD's logging and analysis capabilities. Specifically, leveraging the intrusion prevention system, IPS, logs to identify the specific signatures that are triggering on the anomalous traffic is paramount. This allows for precise identification of the suspected threat or misconfiguration. Once the triggering signatures are known, examining the associated traffic metadata, source/destination IPs, ports, protocols, provides context. This data-driven approach ensures that any policy adjustments are targeted and effective, directly addressing the identified threat without unnecessarily impacting other network functions. This aligns with best practices for incident response and security posture management, ensuring that security controls are both effective and efficient. Incorrect approaches analysis. Disabling IPS entirely or broadly whitelisting the observed traffic without a thorough investigation represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Disabling IPS removes a critical layer of defense against known and emerging threats, directly violating the principle of maintaining a secure network perimeter as expected by regulatory frameworks governing data protection and network integrity. Broadly whitelisting traffic without understanding its nature is equally problematic. It bypasses security controls that may be essential for compliance with data handling regulations, e.g. PCI DSS if financial data is involved, or HIPAA if health data is involved, and opens the network to potential exploitation by malicious actors. This approach prioritizes expediency over security and compliance, demonstrating a lack of due diligence and professional responsibility. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should follow a structured incident response methodology. This typically involves 1. Identification, confirming the anomaly and its scope. 2. Containment, preventing further spread or impact. 3. Eradication, removing the threat or misconfiguration. 4. Recovery, restoring normal operations. 5. Lessons learned, improving future defenses. In the context of firepower, this translates to 1. Utilizing logging and reporting to understand the anomaly. 2. Examining IPS and other security service logs for specific indicators. 3. Correlating this data with network traffic flows. 4. Making targeted policy adjustments based on evidence. 5. Documenting the findings and actions taken. This systematic process ensures that security decisions are informed, justifiable, and aligned with both operational needs and regulatory requirements. Question 14. The assessment process reveals that the Cisco Firepower Threat Defense (FTD) intrusion prevention system (IPS) is generating a high volume of alerts, impacting the efficiency of the Security Operations Center (SOC) and raising concerns about potential legitimate threats being overlooked. The security team is tasked with optimizing the IPS policy to reduce false positives while maintaining robust threat detection capabilities. Considering the need for effective and efficient network security, which of the following approaches is the most professionally sound for tuning the FTD IPS policy? Option A. Enable all available IPS intrusion detection rules to ensure maximum security coverage, regardless of the potential for increased alert volume and false positives. Option B. Systematically analyze IPS alert logs and traffic patterns to identify specific false positives and tune individual intrusion detection rules or rule categories based on the organization's unique threat landscape and critical assets. Option C. Apply a generic pre-configured IPS rule set recommended for general enterprise environments without further customization or analysis of the specific network context. Option D. Disable the IPS functionality entirely until a comprehensive network redesign can be implemented to address the perceived performance issues. Correct answer is B. Systematically analyze IPS alert logs and traffic patterns to identify specific false positives and tune individual intrusion detection rules or rule categories based on the organization's unique threat landscape and critical assets. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in network security, balancing the need for granular control with the operational overhead of managing complex security policies. In the context of Cisco Firepower Threat Defense, FTD, and its intrusion prevention system, IPS, capabilities, understanding how to effectively tune detection policies is crucial for minimizing false positives and ensuring that genuine threats are not missed. This scenario is professionally challenging because an overly aggressive IPS policy can lead to significant network disruption, impacting business operation, while an overly permissive policy leaves the organization vulnerable to attacks. The need for precise configuration requires a deep understanding of both the technology and the potential impact on the business. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and data-driven method for tuning IPS policies. By analyzing the specific threat landscape and the organization's critical assets, security professionals can tailor the IPS rules to be both effective and efficient. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and the need for proportionate security measures, as mandated by general cybersecurity best practices that underpin regulatory compliance. The focus on specific attack vectors and the use of Cisco's recommended tuning guidelines ensures that the security posture is robust without introducing unnecessary operational burdens or security gaps. An incorrect approach that relies solely on enabling all IPS rules without proper analysis is professionally unacceptable. This would likely lead to a high volume of false positives, overwhelming security teams, and potentially blocking legitimate traffic, which is a failure in operational efficiency and could violate service-level agreements or business continuity objectives. Furthermore, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in understanding the specific risks to the organization, which is a fundamental ethical and professional failing. Another incorrect approach, disabling IPS entirely due to perceived performance issues without a thorough investigation and remediation plan, is also professionally unacceptable. This creates a significant security vulnerability, exposing the organization to known threats. It represents a dereliction of duty to protect organizational assets and data, which has direct ethical and potential legal ramifications. A third incorrect approach, applying generic IPS rule sets without considering the specific network environment and threat profile, is also professionally unsound. While it might seem like a quick solution, it fails to address the unique risks and vulnerabilities of the organization, leading to either overblocking or underprotection. This lack of tailored security is a failure to meet the professional standard of care expected in network security. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a phased approach. First, understanding the organization's critical assets and threat landscape. Second, implementing a baseline IPS policy based on Cisco's recommendations and industry best practices. Third, actively monitoring IPS alerts and traffic logs to identify false positives and potential missed threats. Fourth, systematically tuning the IPS rules based on this analysis, prioritizing critical threats and minimizing false positives. And finally, regularly reviewing and updating the IPS policy to adapt to evolving threats and network changes. This iterative process ensures that the security controls are effective, efficient, and aligned with business objectives. Question 15. During the evaluation of network security enhancements for a critical business segment, a security engineer is tasked with implementing Cisco Firepower Intrusion Prevention System (IPS) capabilities. The primary objective is to proactively detect and block malicious traffic in real time without introducing significant network latency or requiring extensive network re-architecture. Considering the need for effective threat mitigation and minimal operational impact, which deployment strategy for the Firepower IPS would best achieve these goals? Option A. Deploying the Firepower IPS in an inline, transparent bridge mode to inspect and act upon traffic directly as it passes through the network segment. Option B. Implementing the Firepower IPS in a routed mode, integrating it as a gateway device for the segment to leverage its routing functionalities. Option C. Configuring the Firepower IPS in a passive, promiscuous mode to monitor traffic flow and generate alerts without actively interfering with data packets. Option D. Deploying the Firepower IPS as a standalone virtual appliance on a separate network segment, forwarding relevant traffic for inspection. The correct answer is A. Deploying the Firepower IPS in an inline, transparent bridge mode to inspect and act upon traffic directly as it passes through the network segment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in network security by requiring a comparative analysis of different intrusion prevention system (IPS) deployment strategies within the context of Cisco Firepower. The core difficulty lies in understanding the nuanced trade-offs between performance, security efficacy, and operational complexity, all while adhering to the implicit regulatory expectation of maintaining a robust and compliant security posture, as outlined by the 300-710 SNCF exam objectives. The need to balance these factors without compromising network availability or introducing new vulnerabilities demands a deep understanding of Firepower's capabilities and best practices. Correct approach analysis. Deploying Firepower IPS in an inline, transparent bridge mode offers the best professional practice for this scenario. This approach allows the IPS to inspect traffic in real time and actively block malicious packets before they reach their destination, directly addressing the requirement for proactive threat prevention. Its transparent nature means it operates at layer 2 without requiring IP address changes or complex routing configurations, minimizing network disruption and simplifying integration. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and defense in depth, ensuring that security controls are integrated seamlessly without becoming a single point of failure or introducing significant latency. From a compliance perspective, this method provides the highest level of assurance that threats are being actively mitigated, which is crucial for meeting security mandates that require demonstrable threat prevention capabilities. Incorrect approaches analysis. Deploying Firepower IPS in a routed mode while offering advanced routing capabilities introduces significant complexity and potential for network disruption. If misconfigured, it can become a single point of failure, impacting network availability. This approach might be overkill if the primary goal is simply intrusion prevention without requiring advanced routing functions. From a regulatory standpoint, a misconfigured routed IPS could lead to unintended network segmentation or traffic redirection, potentially violating policies that mandate clear traffic flow and accessibility. Deploying Firepower IPS in a passive, promiscuous mode, e.g., tap mode, is an incorrect approach for active threat prevention. While it allows for traffic monitoring and analysis without impacting network performance, it cannot actively block threats in real time. This means malicious traffic would still reach its intended destination, failing to meet the core objective of preventing intrusions. This approach would be insufficient for regulatory requirements that demand active threat mitigation and prevention, as it only provides detection and alerting capabilities. Deploying Firepower IPS as a standalone virtual appliance without integration into the network's core security architecture is also an incorrect approach. This creates a security silo, limiting its visibility and effectiveness. It cannot inspect traffic traversing the main network paths, rendering its threat prevention capabilities largely ineffective for the majority of network traffic. This fragmented approach undermines the principle of a unified security posture and would likely be flagged during security audits as a significant gap in defense. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this scenario by first clearly defining the primary security objective, active threat prevention. Then, They must evaluate deployment modes based on their ability to meet this objective with minimal operational overhead and risk of network disruption. The decision-making process should involve understanding the capabilities of the chosen security technology, Cisco Firepower IPS, and how each deployment mode impacts its effectiveness and the overall network infrastructure. A risk assessment should be conducted for each potential deployment, considering performance implications, potential for single points of failure, and ease of management. The chosen solution must demonstrably contribute to the organization's security posture and align with relevant compliance frameworks by providing active, verifiable threat mitigation. Question 16. Market research demonstrates that organizations are increasingly targeted by sophisticated network intrusions. A security administrator responsible for a Cisco Firepower deployment needs to implement a strategy for inspecting network traffic to detect and prevent malicious activity. Considering the need for both detection and prevention, which of the following approaches best aligns with securing networks effectively within the scope of the 300-710 SNCF exam's implied best practices? Option A. Configure Intrusion Prevention System, IPS, policies with comprehensive intrusion detection rules, and set response actions to block malicious traffic. Option B. Deploy Intrusion Detection System, IDs, sensors to monitor traffic and generate alerts for suspicious activity, but do not configure any blocking actions. Option C. Disable Deep Packet Inspection for all encrypted traffic and rely solely on perimeter firewall rules for security. Option D. Implement Basic Access Control Lists, ACL, to filter traffic based on IP addresses and ports and log all denied traffic. Correct answer is A. Configure Intrusion Prevention System, IPS, policies with comprehensive intrusion detection rules and set response actions to block malicious traffic. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in network security, balancing the need for granular threat detection with the operational overhead and potential for false positives. A security administrator must select the most effective and compliant method for inspecting traffic for malicious content within the constraints of the Cisco Firepower 300-710 SNCF exam's regulatory framework. This requires understanding the capabilities of Firepower's Intrusion Prevention System IPS and Intrusion Detection System IDs features and how they align with best practices for network security monitoring and incident response, as implicitly guided by the exam's focus on securing networks. The correct approach leverages the advanced capabilities of Firepower's IPS to actively block threats based on signature and behavioral analysis, which is a proactive and efficient method for mitigating known and emerging attacks. This aligns with the principle of defense in depth and the goal of minimizing the attack surface. By configuring IPS policies with appropriate intrusion detection rules and response action, the administrator can ensure that malicious traffic is identified and prevented from entering or traversing the network, thereby meeting the security objectives implicitly expected by the 300-710 SNCF certification. An incorrect approach that relies solely on basic packet filtering without deep packet inspection, DPI, fails to address sophisticated threats that may evade simple port or protocol-based rules. This would be a regulatory failure as it does not provide adequate protection against modern attack vectors, potentially violating implicit security mandates for robust network defense. Another incorrect approach, focusing only on logging without active blocking, represents an IDS-only strategy. While useful for forensic analysis, it is insufficient for real-time threat mitigation and would be considered a failure to implement effective preventative security controls, leaving the network vulnerable to immediate compromise. A third incorrect approach, disabling inspection for certain traffic types without a clear, documented risk assessment and justification, introduces significant security gaps and would be a direct violation of due diligence and responsible network security management. Professionals should approach such decisions by first understanding the specific threat landscape and regulatory expectations relevant to their organization. This involves a thorough risk assessment, identifying critical assets, and evaluating the potential impact of various threats. The selection of security controls, such as IPS/IDS policies, should be based on their ability to effectively mitigate identified risks while considering performance and operational impact. Continuous monitoring, tuning of security policies, and regular review of logs and alerts are crucial for maintaining an effective security posture. Question 17. Governance review demonstrates that the network security team is considering consolidating all threat mitigation and access control logic into a single, highly complex access control policy, ACT, within Cisco Firepower, aiming to simplify management by avoiding the configuration of separate intrusion prevention system (IPS) policies. What is the most appropriate professional approach to address this finding? Option A. Configure the ACP with extremely granular rules that attempt to block all known malicious traffic signatures, effectively replacing the need for a separate IPS policy. Option B. Implement a layered security strategy by configuring the ACP for broad access control and a separate IPS policy for deep packet inspection and threat mitigation. Option C. Configure the IPS policy to block all traffic that does not explicitly match an allow rule within the ACP, effectively making the ACP redundant. Option D. Disable IPS inspection for all traffic that is permitted by the ACP, assuming the ACP's allow rules are sufficient for security. The correct answer is B. Implement a layered security strategy by configuring the ACP for broad access control and a separate IPS policy for deep packet inspection and threat mitigation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security, balancing the need for granular access control with the operational overhead of managing complex policies. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying the principles of least privilege and defense in depth within the context of Cisco Firepower's access control policy, ACP, and intrusion prevention system, IPS, policies, ensuring compliance with general cybersecurity best practices without specific regulatory mandates being cited for this exam. The difficulty arises from the potential for misconfiguration to either create security gaps or hinder legitimate network traffic, impacting both security posture and business operations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a layered security strategy where the ACP is used for broad access control based on network segmentation and user roles, while the IPS policy is employed for deep packet inspection to detect and block malicious traffic patterns. This aligns with the principle of defense in depth, where multiple security controls are implemented to protect assets. The ACP acts as the first line of defense, enforcing who can access what, and the IPS policy provides a more granular, signature-based, and anomaly detection-based layer to identify and mitigate threats that bypass initial access controls. This separation of concerns allows for more efficient policy management and troubleshooting, ensuring that access is granted appropriately and that threats are actively identified and neutralized. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on the ACP to block all malicious traffic by creating overly restrictive rules that attempt to identify and deny specific attack signatures. This is inefficient and prone to errors, as ACP rules are not designed for deep packet inspection and signature matching. It would lead to a brittle policy that is difficult to maintain and likely to miss sophisticated threats. Ethically, this approach fails to implement a robust security posture, potentially exposing the organization to risks. Another incorrect approach is to configure the IPS policy to block all traffic that does not explicitly match an allow rule within the ACP. This is the inverse of the intended functionality and would effectively shut down the network, as the IPS is designed to inspect traffic that has already been permitted by the ACP. This would represent a significant operational failure and a breach of professional responsibility to maintain network availability. A third incorrect approach is to disable IPS inspection for traffic that is already permitted by the ACP, assuming that the ACP's allow rules are sufficient. This negates the purpose of the IPS, which is to detect and prevent threats that may exploit legitimate traffic flows. It creates a significant security gap by failing to inspect potentially malicious content within otherwise permitted communications, violating the principle of defense in depth. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach network security policy configuration by first understanding the distinct roles of different security components. The ACP is for access control, defining what traffic is allowed or denied based on source, destination, port, and protocol. The IPS is for threat prevention, inspecting the content of allowed traffic for malicious patterns. A layered approach, starting with broad access control and then applying deeper inspection for threat detection, is the most effective and manageable strategy. When faced with policy design, professionals should ask, Does this rule enforce who can talk to whom, or does it inspect what they are saying? This distinction is crucial for effective firepower policy management. Question 18. Regulatory review indicates that an organization handling sensitive financial data must comply with specific data protection mandates. When deploying Cisco Firepower's intrusion prevention system, IPS, to secure its network, which approach best aligns with these regulatory requirements and demonstrates professional due diligence? Option A. Implement IPS rules based solely on the latest global threat intelligence feeds, without correlating them to the specific types of financial data processed or the regulatory obligations of the organization. Option B. Prioritize IPS configurations that minimize network latency and disable any rules that generate frequent alerts, regardless of their potential impact on sensitive data protection. Option C. Configure the IPS with default security policies provided by Cisco, assuming they offer comprehensive protection for all regulatory environments. Option D. Conduct a thorough analysis of the applicable financial data protection regulations. Identify specific threats to sensitive data outlined by these regulations, and then tailor the firepower IPS policies to detect and prevent those specific threats. Correct answer is C. Configure the IPS with default security policies provided by Cisco, assuming they offer comprehensive protection for all regulatory environments. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security, where the implementation of a new security technology, Cisco Firepower, must align with existing regulatory compliance mandates. A professional challenge lies in ensuring that the configuration and operationalization of Firepower, specifically its intrusion prevention system, IPS, capabilities, do not inadvertently create compliance gaps or introduce new vulnerabilities that could be exploited to violate data privacy or security regulations. The need for deep analysis stems from the potential for misconfiguration to lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the specific regulatory framework applicable to the organization's data handling and network operations, and then mapping Firepower's IPS features to meet those requirements. This means configuring IPS policies to detect and prevent threats that target sensitive data or compromise the integrity of systems holding regulated information. For instance, if the organization handles protected health information, FI, under HIPAA, the IPS must be tuned to identify and block attacks targeting healthcare systems or data exfiltration attempts of PHI. This proactive, compliance-driven configuration ensures that the security technology actively supports, rather than hinders, regulatory adherence, representing best professional practice by prioritizing data protection and legal obligations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing IPS without a clear understanding of the regulatory landscape is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. For example, configuring IPS rules based solely on generic threat intelligence without considering the specific types of data processed or the regulatory obligations associated with that data, e.g., PCI DSS for payment card data, GDPR for personal data of EU citizens, can lead to non-compliance. This approach fails to address the specific risks that regulators are concerned about, potentially leaving critical data unprotected against relevant threats. Another failure would be to disable IPS features deemed noisy or performance impacting without a documented risk assessment and a compensatory control that meets regulatory requirements. This prioritizes operational convenience over mandated security controls, violating the principle of due diligence and potentially leading to breaches that incur regulatory penalties. A third failure would be to rely on vendor defaults without customization. While vendor defaults offer a baseline, they are rarely tailored to the unique regulatory environment and specific data assets of an organization, thus failing to meet the reasonable security standards often implied by regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a risk-based, compliance-first approach. This involves 1. Identifying all applicable regulatory frameworks. 2. Understanding the specific security and data protection requirements within those frameworks. 3. Assessing the organization's data assets and the threats they face. 4. Configuring security technologies like Cisco Firepower's IPS to directly address these identified risks and compliance obligations. 5. regularly reviewing and updating configurations based on evolving threats and regulatory changes. This systematic process ensures that security investments are strategically aligned with legal and ethical responsibilities. Question 19. The evaluation methodology shows that a U.S.-based financial institution is deploying Cisco Firepower Threat Defense, FTD, to enhance its network security and meet stringent regulatory compliance mandates. The institution handles significant volumes of credit card transaction data and customer personally identifiable information, PI. Which of the following configurations within Cisco Firepower Threat Defense best addresses the regulatory requirements for protecting sensitive financial data and preventing its unauthorized exfiltration, while also providing auditable logs? Option A. Configuring the FTD's intrusion prevention system, IPS, with financial data-specific intrusion detection and prevention signatures, and deploying data loss prevention, DLP, policies to identify and block the transmission of sensitive financial data patterns, coupled with detailed event logging. Option B. Focusing solely on inbound traffic filtering to prevent external threats from accessing the financial network, while allowing unrestricted outbound traffic for legitimate business operations. Option C. Implementing granular access control lists, ACL, on the FTD to permit only necessary ports and protocols for financial transactions, and ensuring comprehensive logging of all allowed and denied traffic. Option D. Enabling basic stateful firewall inspection on the FTD to monitor network connections and logging all established connections without specific content inspection for sensitive data. Correct answer is C. Implementing granular access control lists, ACL, on the FTD to permit only necessary ports and protocols for financial transactions, and ensuring comprehensive logging of all allowed and denied traffic. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a critical need for understanding how Cisco Firepower Threat Defense, FTD, handles specific types of network traffic for compliance and security posture. In this scenario, a financial services firm, operating under strict U.S. regulatory frameworks such as the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA, and the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS, is implementing a new Cisco Firepower solution. The challenge lies in ensuring that sensitive financial data, particularly credit card information and customer personally identifiable information, PI, is adequately protected, and that network access controls are granular enough to meet audit requirements. Firm must demonstrate to regulators that their network security controls are effective in preventing unauthorized access and exfiltration of sensitive data. This requires a deep understanding of FTD's capabilities in traffic inspection, policy enforcement, and logging, specifically in relation to the types of data being transmitted. The correct approach involves leveraging FTD's intrusion prevention system, IPS, and data loss prevention, DLP features, configured with specific signatures and policies tailored to detect and block known financial data exfiltration attempts and sensitive data patterns. This aligns with the proactive security measures mandated by GLBA and PCI DSS, which require organizations to implement technical safeguards to protect cardholder data and customer information. By using FTD's advanced inspection capabilities, the firm can achieve granular control over traffic, log relevant events for auditing, and generate alerts for suspicious activities, thereby demonstrating compliance. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on basic firewall access control lists, ACL, without deeper inspection. This fails to meet the spirit and letter of regulations like PCI DSS, which mandates protection of cardholder data beyond simple port and protocol filtering. It also ignores the advanced threat vectors that can bypass ACLs. Another incorrect approach would be to enable IPS/DLP without proper tuning or specific policies for financial data. This could lead to either excessive false positives, impacting legitimate business operation, or worse, missing actual threats, leaving sensitive data vulnerable and creating a compliance gap. Finally, focusing only on inbound traffic protection while neglecting outbound traffic inspection for data exfiltration would be a significant oversight, as many data breaches involve unauthorized data leaving the network. The professional decision-making process should involve a thorough risk assessment of sensitive data flows, followed by a detailed mapping of regulatory requirements, GLBA, PCI DSS, to FTD's security features. This includes understanding the specific signatures and policies available for financial data protection and configuring them appropriately. Continuous monitoring, regular policy tuning, and comprehensive logging are essential to maintain an effective security posture and demonstrate ongoing compliance to auditors and regulators. Question 20. Strategic planning requires a thorough evaluation of network security control placement to ensure optimal threat mitigation and regulatory compliance. Considering a scenario where a company needs to protect a critical internal server farm using Cisco Firepower Threat Defense, FTD, virtual appliances, which deployment strategy would best balance security efficacy, operational resilience, and adherence to common cybersecurity best practices for inspecting traffic to and from this sensitive resource? Option A. Deploy FTD virtual appliances only on the internet edge, without any internal inspection capabilities. Option B. Deploy FTD virtual appliances as separate, standalone units within different internal network segments. Option C. Deploy FTD virtual appliances directly at the internet edge, in front of the existing edge firewall. Option D. Deploy FTD virtual appliances in a high-availability cluster, positioned behind the existing edge firewall, but in front of the internal server farm. The correct answer is D. Deploy FTD virtual appliances in a high-availability cluster, positioned behind the existing edge firewall, but in front of the internal server farm. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security, balancing the need for robust threat detection and prevention with the operational realities of network performance and resource allocation. The professional challenge lies in making an informed decision about the optimal placement of security controls within a Cisco Firepower environment, considering the specific regulatory compliance requirements of the 300-710 SNCF exam's implied jurisdiction, which, for this exam, is generally understood to align with common U.S. federal cybersecurity frameworks and best practices. Though specific regulations are not explicitly stated for this exam scope, we will infer based on common industry standards applicable to such certifications. The need to comply with potential audit requirements, maintain service availability, and effectively mitigate threats necessitates a strategic approach to firepower deployment. Correct approach analysis. Deploying Firepower Threat Defense, FTD, virtual appliances in a high availability, cluster behind the edge firewall, but in front of the internal server farm, represents best professional practice. This placement allows the FTD to inspect all ingress and egress traffic destined for or originating from the internal network. By inspecting traffic at this critical juncture, it can effectively enforce security policies, detect and block advanced threats, and log relevant events for compliance and forensic purposes. This approach aligns with the principle of defense in depth, ensuring that threats are identified and neutralized before they can reach sensitive internal resources. Furthermore, the HA configuration ensures continuous security coverage even in the event of a hardware or software failure, which is crucial for maintaining operational resilience and meeting uptime requirements often stipulated in regulatory frameworks. This placement also allows for granular control over traffic flows to and from the server farm, facilitating compliance with data segregation and access control mandates. Incorrect approach is analysis. Placing FTD virtual appliances directly at the internet edge, in front of the existing edge firewall, would create a redundant layer of perimeter security, but might not be the most efficient or effective placement for inspecting traffic destined for the internal server farm. The edge firewall typically handles initial ingress filtering, and placing FTDs here could lead to duplicated inspection or performance bottlenecks if not carefully configured. More importantly, it might not provide the same level of granular inspection for traffic with an asterisk the internal network or traffic originating from the internet that has already passed the initial edge firewall. This could lead to regulatory compliance gaps if internal traffic inspection is a requirement. Deploying FTD virtual appliances as separate, standalone units within different internal network segments, without a centralized HA cluster, introduces significant management complexity and potential inconsistencies in security policy enforcement. While it might offer localized protection, it dilutes the centralized visibility and control that firepower is designed to provide. This fragmented approach can lead to security gaps, make incident response more challenging, and complicate compliance audits, as it becomes difficult to ensure uniform application of security controls across the entire network. It also fails to leverage the full capabilities of firepower for comprehensive threat intelligence sharing and correlation, placing FTD virtual appliances only on the internet edge, without any internal inspection capabilities, would leave the internal server farm vulnerable to threats that bypass the perimeter or originate from within the network. This approach neglects the critical need for internal segmentation and threat detection, which is essential for containing breaches and protecting sensitive data. Many regulatory frameworks mandate internal security controls and the ability to detect lateral movement of threats, which this placement would fail to address, creating a significant compliance and security risk. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach network security deployment by first understanding the organization's specific threat landscape, business requirements, and applicable regulatory obligations. A thorough risk assessment is paramount. The decision on where to deploy security controls like Cisco firepower should be driven by the need to achieve the highest level of protection for critical assets while maintaining operational efficiency. This involves evaluating different deployment models, e.g., inline, passive, virtual, physical HA clusters, and their impact on traffic flow, performance, and manageability. A phased approach, starting with critical ingress/egress points, and then expanding to internal segmentation based on risk, is often advisable. Regular review and testing of security configurations are essential to ensure ongoing effectiveness and compliance.